Welcome to the Navigating Cancer Together podcast. My name is Talea Dindy. I am a 10-year cancer thriver, cancer doula, and owner of On the Other Side. I use my experience to help others get on the other side of cancer. This podcast is about sharing stories, resources, and information about all things related to cancer and wellness. I interview guests from all walks of life who are living with cancer, caregivers, and those who made it on the other side. Also, I talk with organizations, healthcare professionals, and experts in the health and wellness spaces who offer complementary and integrative care. Join me. We are in this together. Hello, and welcome to Navigating Cancer Together. My name is Talea Dindy, and today our very special guest is Maureen Kures. Maureen is an RN, and she is the CEO of RadiantMorning.com. She is on a mission to guide families to decide, document, and discuss their final chapter plans to bring peace for those who live on. Now she facilitates family conversations and leads virtual group workshops to replace drama, trauma, and chaos with calm, ease, and peace. I think that we all could use some help from Maureen in those areas. Maureen, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Oh, thank you, Talea, for having me.
It's my pleasure. So Maureen, why don't we dive right in? Please tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, my background, I have been a nurse for, almost 38 years. That's hard to believe. But I got my very first nursing job on an oncology floor. And, I didn't know anything really about death and dying. And to me, I thought, oh, that's a scary place to work. I don't really want to work there because people die, and my family, we didn't talk about it. But over that first year, I found that it wasn't scary at all. It was really, the patients were amazing, their families were amazing, and I realized that end of life journey wasn't as scary as I thought it was. And it was actually a time where people could come together, they can say what needs to be said, and that there was a lot of peacefulness about it.
Wonderful.
And I just fell in love.
Wonderful. That is so wonderful. And so what really prompted you to become an oncology nurse, when you started your nursing career? Because it sounds like you didn't really plan on being an oncology nurse.
I did not. And at the time I graduated from school, there were no jobs for nurses in the state of California where I was. I mean, my friend and I, we went up down the West Coast, and I ended up getting this job, and I thought, I'm going to get my year's experience and get out of here as fast as I can, because I wanted to be a flight nurse. I wanted to be a nurse where I transported critically ill patients, from one place to another. I had my whole path planned out. I knew exactly what I was going to do, and I had to do 1 year of a med surge rotation, and oncology happened to be it. So I thought, okay, I'll use it as a means to an end. But I ended up staying there for the majority of my nursing career has been in end of life. And like I said, I fell in love, and I never did fulfill my early on dream of being a flight nurse, because I got so much fulfillment out of doing what I was doing with patients. With oncology, I worked bone marrow transplant, hospice, and it was just also fulfilling to me. I can't imagine having not done that journey.
Isn't it amazing how we start out with our own plans, but God has something totally different in mind for us?
Yeah, he just laughs and says, oh, no.
Exactly.
But, I didn't know that I would be comfortable and good at talking to people about end of life, and to talk to them as they were dying, about dying. And it brought a lot of peace to me, and a lot of peace to my patients too, and their families. And I'm still in touch with family members from people I took care of, almost 40 years ago, with their children. And so It was very fulfilling.
That's wonderful. And the fact that you were able to, and you still are able to just create that sense of peace and calm for people at a very tough time in their lives, that's so important. And you talked about, at first you were not really too excited about taking this career path. And so that leads me to this question. What are some misconceptions that, people may have about end of life and end of life planning?
Well, some misconceptions that it's scary.
Mhm.
I think about end of life that it's going to be painful, and that if you misconceptions about end of life planning, there's a lot, but um, if you don't talk about it, it won't happen. Well,
Mhm.
one of the things that's 100% in this life is that we're going to die, and so we just can't get out of this life alive. But the more we plan for it, the more we can hope to have our wishes fulfilled. It doesn't always work that way, but the more that we can plan and talk about it, the more chance there is for things to happen the way we want them to. And but yeah, just I think that speaking of dying isn't scary. It doesn't manifest death. It just
Mhm.
helps us to understand it better, understand our thought process and how we became the way we are around talking about death. Like my family, as I told you, we never talked about it. My grandpa died. I remember my mom crying. I remember going to the
Mhm.
funeral, but we didn't talk about it. And I was a child at the time, but um, that influenced me. That shaped my belief about dying and end of life. So I had this opportunity that was not real thrilling to me, but it turned out to just be so much more than I ever thought it would be.
So it kind of came full circle for you, it sounds like. And, too, I'd like to add that even own experiences in my personal life with death, it just seems like when someone passes away, it brings out the worst in people, especially if the person who has passed on hasn't left any instructions or their wishes or anything like that. It just creates so much tension and, like you say, drama. And it's hard for people that are trying to grieve,
It's
you know.
really hard. It
Mhm.
prolongs grief and it makes grief messy and complicated instead of being healing. I mean, we're always going to grieve when someone dies. Like my dad died 12 and a half years ago. I still
Mhm.
grieve him to this day, but it's a
Yes.
different, gentler kind of grief, which so often when we don't plan, when we don't talk about it, it's it just makes us have this icky grief. Like it's scary. It's something that just won't go away. I know looking at myself versus say my mother who didn't want to talk about my dad dying. My dad and I had a lot of in-depth conversations. And so watching my grief process, even my siblings' grief process and my mom's grief process, they were all so different. And I'm so grateful I had the courage to talk to my dad about it and that I could share that journey with him. Because one of the things I've also found from working with people that are dying is that they know they're dying and they
Mhm.
often want to talk about their life and their life experiences. And there's something called life review that as a hospice nurse and hospice volunteer, that's a big thing with hospice, but to review different periods of our lives and to find that we had meaning and purpose, that our life meant something is so important to people. So I'm so glad I had those conversations with my dad,
That's
and
wonderful.
but it made my grief much more peaceful than, let's say, my mom's, where
And
she struggled for a long time.
yes. And Maureen, that actually makes sense because in my mind, that was another way for you and your father to bond,
Oh,
before his passing.
so it was, there's one moment. My dad was a man of few words. I used to talk to him almost every day. He was in California, but he'd always say, "How are the boys? How's the weather? And what's the price of gas?" And that's what he'd always want to know. And so we'd have these short conversations, but they got longer as he progressed through his disease. And I remember I wrote him a letter about what he meant to me and the impact he had had on my life. And now I'll get all teary, but I remember I was going to take our 2 kittens to my cousin's house, because my dad had taken a turn, and I was going to, we were gonna go down for Easter to my parents' house instead of my husband's parents' house in the Midwest, and, my dad called, and he started talking, like, he sharing things that he had never shared before. I had to pull over on the side of the road. I thought it was gonna be the normal, "How are the boys? How's the weather?
Mm-hmm.
How's the price of gas?" Um, and that is a conversation that I will cherish the rest of my life. And
And
that's what starting these conversations, that's what the gifts that we can be given.
and that's exactly what I was going to say. He left you with the gift.
Mm,
And what I really admire too is that he was willing, because like you said, he probably knew that his time was coming to an end, and he was willing, he wanted to open up to you and share things with you. So
yes.
in some instances, that's a two-way street where both people have to be at a place where they're open, and then the other person's willing to receive and help facilitate that as well.
Yeah, and like I cried with my dad that day. And that's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay to cry and let them know that, it's darn sad that they're not going to be in this world with us anymore. And people are afraid to do that. I've seen over time
Mhm.
that they're afraid to let the other to show their emotions to the person that's dying.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
gosh, I'd want people to know that I mean, I'd want to know that I made a difference in people's lives, and it's
Mhm.
okay to show whatever. And sometimes emotions aren't good, and it's okay to share those too, and to make peace. I think one
Mhm.
of the gifts. It's funny because back when I first was an oncology nurse, people didn't survive cancer like they're doing today,
Mhm.
and there's been such strides in cancer treatment. And I look at that and I think, but it gives us the gift of time to say
Mhm.
what needs to be said, to, seek forgiveness and to forgive others. And it gives us the time to say what's on our heart and say goodbye,
Yes.
which so many people don't have the time because they're afraid to start these conversations. Or, it's when someone dies suddenly,
Mhm.
that's hard.
Yes.
But that's why we need to live our lives. Like, say what needs to be said as we go through our lives.
That is so true. And it's so important because a lot of times when people, the family or loved ones or friends that are left behind, it's like it leaves a void because they're like, I wish I would have known, or I wish I would have known what this person was thinking or how they were feeling, and you just don't get that closure sometimes, unfortunately.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I had a cousin that I was close to, and he died suddenly. He dropped dead of a heart attack. He was in his late 40s, but he'd been trying to call me that the weekend that he died.
Oh.
And we were away, and sometimes he would talk and talk, and I thought, oh, I'll call him on Monday when I'm back. Well, he died. And, so I
Ah,
felt guilt over that, not taking his call. And, but then I thought, no, he knew exactly how I felt about him. And he knew that I loved him no matter what was going on in his life. And, but still, I had that regret. Although I don't think we should live with regret, but there was that little
mhm.
moment like, why didn't I take his call? But
Yes.
we can't anticipate that. But I did have the peace of mind of knowing that he knew how I felt.
That's a great point, Maureen, because there have been times where, people have reached out to me and I know that they're long-winded. So I'm like, okay, like you said, I'll take that call tomorrow or when I have more time to just kind of sit and focus on the conversation. And I could see where a person would feel guilty in that scenario. But I also like the way you reframed it and said, because of our relationship, my cousin knew how I felt about him. And so I think that's very important for the audience to really take heed to that and not, in those situations, not carry so much regret or guilt.
Right. I
Hmm.
think regret is a wasted emotion.
Hmm.
If we could learn something from it, from what happens. Like for my cousin, I might be more inclined to take someone's call that's long-winded and say, I can't talk right now. We're on vacation. Can I call you on Monday? Or we're away with the family for the weekend. Can I call you on Monday? Um, I've been more inclined to do that than to just let it go to voicemail. But so, as long as we learn and grow, we shouldn't have regret, even when things
Mm.
didn't go the way that they maybe should have, or we wished they had gone, because we can always say we should have done. What's it called? Shitting on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I should have picked up that phone, but I didn't.
Mhm.
And there's no way I'm ever going to change that. So all I can do is do better next time.
Wise words. Thank you. So, Maureen, being an oncology nurse, what do you see as some benefits that can come from a cancer diagnosis?
I think that it makes people reprioritize their lives.
Hmm.
What they thought was important, all of a sudden there's not much meaning to working yourself 27 hours a day, that I've seen people that have really taken a hard look at what's important and restructured their lives and thought,
Hmm.
I'm going to give more time to those that I love. I'm going to travel more. I'm going to do the things that are important to me, because all of a sudden, when you get that cancer diagnosis, your life is finite, even though all our
Hmm.
lives are finite, but it
Yeah.
becomes so clear in that moment that, oh my gosh, I have something that can kill me. And
Right.
I, what have I done? Have I done all the stuff that I want? That's why I love bucket lists. And I
Yes.
think that we should all make them. It also gives us what I was saying before, the time. It gives people the time to say what needs to be said.
Hmm.
There's a hospice palliative care doctor, Ira Byock.
Hmm.
And he has a book, the oh gosh, now I'm just blanking on it, but really the four most important things. That's not what it's called, but it's to say, um, I forgive, please forgive me. I
Hmm.
forgive you. Thank you. And I love you. And
Yes.
I would also like to add, if someone is dying, goodbye to that. And I think that's the gift that cancer gives us, the ability to forgive people, like I was saying earlier, but also to do the things in life that will bring us meaning.
Yes.
Volunteer, to be able
Hmm.
to volunteer. I've had one of my favorite people. He had two wives die of cancer, and hospice was involved with his second wife, because hospice was relatively new back in the 80s. His first wife had died in the early 70s, and hospice was just, it was around, but not like it is today. And then his next wife died in the early 80s, and it was such a different experience that he ended up volunteering for hospice.
Oh,
And his wife
nice.
had volunteered with him until she took a turn and ended up as a hospice. I mean, she'd been on hospice, been discharged, um, and then had to go back on hospice. But it was such a gift to them, to this man and to his wife, that he kept volunteering.
Hmm. And that's so important. And it does. As a cancer survivor myself, I can say, Maureen, that it does make you prioritize your life because before, to me personally, death was something that was way down the road. But when you get that diagnosis, it's in your face
Mhm.
and you have to face it. And so it does cause you to stop and think and say, hey, right now at this moment, what's important? And it wasn't, like you said, working long hours. It wasn't, getting irritated because someone cut me off in traffic and all those little things that we've allowed to annoy us. So that is so true. It forces you to prioritize your life.
And it gives you time to get your affairs in order.
Hmm.
Um, whether you are a cancer survivor or whether you're not, it does give that time to take care of the things. Get your estate planning in order. Get the things. What legacy do you want to leave? What legacy do you want people to, how do you want people to remember you? You can get all of that in order because there's time to do it. It's shocking
Yes.
once the shock wears off and you think, okay, let me get this stuff done just in case.
That's so true. And that's how it happened. It's like, okay, now's the time more than ever to get those things in order. And so touching on that, Maureen, is there anything else that would fall under the category of get your affairs in order? And what else is important?
Well, I think that the most important thing health wise, from a health standpoint, I think full estate planning is very important. But most people think, oh, I don't have anything or I don't have enough
Mhm.
money. So they don't take care of that will and, um, how to distribute their assets, things like that. And people have more than they think they do, you know. Um,
Yes.
so I'm a fan of full estate planning, but at the very minimum, get the advanced care planning documents done. That's the power of attorney for healthcare document and the advanced directives, meaning what you would want done if this happened, if you were unable to speak for yourself. You want that one person that can speak on your behalf. And because they know what you would want, because you've had these conversations, you want to have it written out in that advanced directive, also known as the living will. Most people know it as the living will,
Mhm.
but it spells out, would you want to be put on life support? Would you not? Or uh, let's say that there was a 50% chance you could get back to how you were if they put you on life support for whatever period of time. We can determine too. We could say, I'll be on life support. Most people think life support is a ventilator, with the
Mhm.
breathing tube on
Yes.
it. But life support is also tube feedings, dialysis. Um, so there's other parts of life support, but in this case, just the ventilator. But, to say, okay, no, I wouldn't want it at all. Yes, I would. Um, or I would with this parameter. So we get to choose and we get to learn about this and
Mhm.
decide what would be right for us. But the
And
the more
go
we
ahead.
can give a roadmap to our families and those that matter most to us, the more of a gift we're giving.
I agree. I agree. That takes so much stress away because there's already enough stress, but then it's just like, okay, trying to remember maybe brief conversations about, okay, did they say that they wanted to be on life support or no, didn't they? Or it's just too much at
Yeah.
that time to try to figure out.
The great thing about our advanced directives, with a will, you do have to go through an attorney and get that done.
Mhm.
But our advanced directives, meaning what we want done at the end of our life, we can change it as often as we want.
Yes, that's
Those are
right.
documents that you can get off the internet. Um, for free. In Washington state where I am, it has to either be witnessed by two people or notarized. It doesn't have to be both. But so I just had surgery in October and it was the weekend before, and my husband had actually planned to go see our son,
Oh,
and he's like, I shouldn't go. I said, yes, you should. I'm not going until Monday. Go and spend the weekend. But I thought, I I have changed a few thoughts
mm,
on my advanced directives. So I pulled up a copy off the internet and I
wow.
filled it out and put some changes just in case, even though I'm healthy. I didn't think there would be complications, but when one goes in for surgery, one never knows what's going to
That's
happen.
right. So
So
true.
my another son's fiance and her twin sister happened to be coming over. Um, so I said, hey, can you guys witness this for me? So I went over it with them. I first called one of my sons is my second alternate healthcare agent if anything were to
Mhm.
happen to my husband and he couldn't step up. So I called him and said, okay, are you sure you're still willing to do this? Because I'm changing this. And he said, yes. I said, this is all I'm changing, that, what, I'd be okay being in a wheelchair. Where before
Mm,
I thought, no, I'd have to be up and ambulatory and being able to
mhm.
do my own activities of daily living and taking care of myself. But as I've aged and gotten older, I thought, no, I think I would be okay as long as I knew who I was and who I'm with and could converse. Then being in a wheelchair is okay for me. So I wanted to put that in there just in case.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I really like that because that's not something that we think about when we go in for surgery. Is that okay before, is there anything that I want to change on my healthcare directive? Like
Yes.
I don't think about that. So thanks for planting that seed. And if I ever have to, go in for surgery, I can say, okay, before, let me just review what I have in place. Is this
Right.
still good?
And that's what I said, it's so easy. I said, we write the story of our lives and we can change it anytime we want with these healthcare directives. So it's as easy as that, but it's also as hard as that because we don't want to think that. You don't want to think of going in for a pretty routine surgery and having something major happen. But
Yes.
yeah,
But you never know.
but
You
you
just,
never know. And it does. And these are for the what ifs of life. What if I'm in that accident? What if I have a problem with the anesthesia and don't come out of surgery being able to know
Mhm.
who I am and where I am? So,
Yes. Maureen, this makes me think about something that you shared with a group that you were speaking with that I was a part of. And it had something to do with if you are in an ambulance or something like that, and it's their job to make sure that they keep you alive. And you were saying that there was an extra step you have to take, I believe.
yes,
Um, and so that might be important for people to know and also note that when they are getting their affairs in order.
there's something called the Portable Orders for Life Sustaining Treatment, POLST, POLST. And every state has their own form. Usually they're a bright color. Ours here in Washington is a bright, like neon green. And those are like you and I wouldn't qualify for a pulse because we don't have some life limiting illness. Usually it's someone that
Mhm.
has a life limiting illness that usually is within a year or so of
Okay.
life expectancy. But meaning that if they're at home, let's say they have chronic heart disease and they're at end stage heart failure, and they know
Mhm.
they're probably only going to be alive a year or so, they should have that form and put it up where if the paramedics are called, they legally have to start CPR. Even if
Mhm.
someone is a do not resuscitate, that's a big thing. DNR, do not resuscitate,
Mhm.
but that's only in the hospital. That is only valid in a hospital setting. So this POLST form is the only thing that paramedics across the nation can follow legally to not perform CPR, to not resuscitate a person. So that's why usually if it's an elderly person or someone with, you can be younger and have a life limiting illness. It could be
Mhm.
that you have cancer, end stage cancer,
Yes.
and they will either look on the back of the front door as a common place, but the most common place is the refrigerator or a kitchen cabinet. And they'll do a sweep and look for that first to make sure um, that they don't resuscitate someone.
Thank you
There's
for
also
sharing
little
that.
wallet cards that they can take. You can take with you in case something happens when you're out. And that happens all the time where people will maybe have a heart attack and they could be near end of life. They could have been wanting to be do not resuscitate, but they collapse in a grocery store, let's say. That
Mm.
happened to my friend's mother, and she had to be
Oh.
resuscitated. And she did not survive the resuscitation, but it had to be done because legally they have to.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. I just
Another
thought that
thing
was important.
Yeah, another thing that I would like to share, if I have just a minute, is the do
Mhm.
not resuscitate order. Let's say you're going into surgery, but you're a do not resuscitate, and the DNR. Ask your surgeon, will this DNR be enforced in surgery? Because oftentimes they will negate the DNR for surgery. Um, and you could end up being resuscitated in the middle of surgery, which happened to a patient of mine. He had a blockage and they were trying to give him some relief, but he was a do not resuscitate. But during surgery, he was a full code. It's called full code.
Mm.
They'll do full resuscitation. So make sure if you know you're near the end of life and you would not want to be resuscitated and they're doing something to relieve your discomfort, um, to make sure that that DNR is still enforced in surgery.
Okay. Great information. That's a lot, but those are
It's a
things
lot.
that people need to know,
Yeah.
and that we're not, often educated on, making sure that we have those specific details covered.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
would, until that day, I never would have known that. And I'd been a nurse for many, many, many years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And so, Maureen, what are some consequences that you've seen from individuals and families that were unprepared for death?
I've seen uh, fighting. I've seen disagreement. I've seen people kept on life support that probably would never have wanted to be. But mostly it's the fighting within the families and the fractured families because they disagree on what should be done, or the regret that they did something that they shouldn't have. Um, that they took their mom off life support, maybe they shouldn't have, or they kept her on life support. And so living with that regret that you did the wrong thing is big when you don't have these important conversations. But usually it's family discord in some way or another.
Mhm. And we hear that so often. And it's so unfortunate because that's a time when people need to come together and really nurture each other.
Yes.
But like you said, there's so many different factors that cause that fighting and tension.
Yes. And it can be really hard on the person who's the decision maker, the healthcare power of attorney, also called healthcare agent, or there's so many surrogate, there's so many different words, but that person that has to make the decision, if she's the only one or he's the only one that knows the wishes of the person they have to make the decision for, that can cause terrible dissension in the family where they're pitted against the person that has to make this important decision. So that's where these conversations as a family unit, or the family can be loosely, it's a loose term, it's those that matter most to us. Bring in the friends,
Mhm.
bring in people that you care about, that you want them to know what you would want in different scenarios.
And Maureen, how would you advise that families and, friends, people that are you're close to, how do we start those conversations?
Well, if I love starting the conversation. In fact, I have a free giveaway, 7 prompts to get the conversation started. But, first of all, never blindside people. Don't invite them over and then just make it all about end of life. Invite them. Either call up or um, send out a little invitation. I've been doing my end of life planning and I would like to discuss it with all of you. Or it could be that you're like, my mom doesn't like to talk about death. Still, she's
Mhm.
85, but she doesn't want to talk about it. She's going to just go to sleep one night, and that will be it. So if only that's what, like, I
Just that
I would vote
simple.
for that too. But so to say, hey, some you can use a prominent celebrity died, and it made me think about what would you want if you were in her position or his position, or um, gosh, my coworker's father just died of a heart attack. It made me thinking, what would you want if that happened? Or you could say, hey, dad, I'll buy you a beer after a round of golf if you'll like share what you'd want with to be done if
Mhm.
anything happens to you and you can't make decisions for yourself. So there's so many different ways to start the conversation. But I always think, once get all your advanced care documents done and then invite everyone over, but tell them what it's about. Invite them over for pie and coffee, or beer and pretzels, whatever your choice is. But don't blindside them. Ask them to come and then ask them to share in that conversation.
That's great advice, not to blindside someone. And I could see where that could go wrong in many ways.
Yes. Yeah.
One thing I do want to ask you is for people, you mentioned your mother, for people like your mother who don't want to talk about it, but you want to talk about it and get answers, how do you navigate that? How do you work through that?
Just gently, and um with my mom, I would just tell her, Mom, gosh, it's important to me to be able to honor and respect your wishes, but I need to know that what they
Mhm.
are. So would you ever be open to having that conversation with me? Well, she'd give me bits and pieces. So I'd just take the bits and pieces, but then I also have three siblings. And so it was my mom. So then I'd disseminate, okay, this is what mom's saying. And when we'd all get together, I would try to do it to get her to talk a little bit about this. So, I had to be very respectful that she doesn't like to talk about this. So I did it gently. But then my mom back about a year ago was diagnosed with COVID, and she had just turned
Mm.
84. And so all of a sudden the game changed. And I called her and I said, Mom, I am your healthcare agent, the one that has to make decisions. And right now you just have a bad cough. But 5 hours from now, we might have to make a decision to put you on a ventilator or not, because that's how quickly these things are changing. And I said, so I'm going to give you three different scenarios and I'm going to call you back in 1 hour. And I said, I need to know this so I can honor what you would want done,
Mm.
because otherwise I can only guess from my perspective and not yours. And so I gave her the three scenarios and I called her back in an hour and she said, I don't want to be put on a ventilator. I said, okay, great. Now I
Mhm.
know. And I said, and I'm going to tell your kids too. And I said, it'd be great if you texted them and said,
Yeah.
this if anything happens, so they all know from you. So she did that, and luckily it never came to that. She just kept her bad cough for a few days and
Good.
then improved. But that's one of the things with COVID that's brought to light. Things can change so quickly.
Mhm. So true. And now more than ever, it's very important to have those things in place.
Yes. Yeah, and to have these conversations so that if it does happen, I mean, I'm glad I had
Mhm.
already started it with my mom over the years, trying to draw things out of her. But I knew I would make the decision, but I wanted all my siblings. I wanted us all to
Yes.
know and to be on the same page, because I have two siblings that are very emotional, which I'm very
Yes.
emotional too. It's not easy to make these
Mhm.
decisions, uh, but two that would have had a really hard time.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. And so, Maureen, when you work with your clients and families, what does that process look like? Can you briefly walk us through that for people who may be interested in coming to you for support?
Yes, thank you so much for asking.
Mhm.
I have a few different ways. I have a 5-week class that I put on virtually, and I've just turned that into an evergreen class, meaning that it's do it at your own pace, where we have ongoing support twice a month with question and answer sessions. So it's either a group course virtually or that do it your own pace with a Q&A. And I work one-on-one with people, reviewing their documents, helping them get things in order, and then helping them plan their family meeting and how to run it and how to invite. So there's a whole template that they can work with on how to get this important conversation started. And then I do also help facilitate family meetings for those that just don't feel comfortable doing it themselves. I'll be there to get the conversation started and keep it going and navigate the conversation. But the one thing I like to tell everyone, this isn't a one and done conversation. It's something that should be, at least review your own paperwork annually. It's your birthday gift to yourself.
Mhm.
Go through and make sure everything's the same and it's how you want it. And then when things change, call that family meeting again and say, okay, I've now had this diagnosis. So I want you to know if this happens, this is how I'm thinking. Or, we last met when I was 65, now I'm 70, or when
Mhm.
I was 50 and now I'm 60, so I just wanted to update you. And it can be light and it can be fun. And, but it just gives people all from yourself plan. They have a plan to follow, that roadmap to follow if anything should happen.
I love that. And thank you so much for noting that it's not one and done because, typically we'll say, okay, well, I checked that off and we do forget about it. It's just like, well, and that goes back to what you were saying about your surgery. You knew that, okay, let me just review my documents again and make sure that everything I want is still current.
Yes.
So, yes, it's not a one and done.
Yeah, that's why I say the birthday gift to ourselves is to review it.
Hmm. Great points, great points. And I could see where your services would be beneficial to so many people and families because for some people it is very hard to talk about.
Yes, it is. Let's face it. Who really wants to talk about dying? It's an emotional process. Even when I go through it, I get a little emotional because uh, we want to live. We want to
Yeah.
live and experience life. But one of the things about getting this work done is that then can truly live life, and we can go forward knowing that, hey, we have a plan. We have it all in order. If anything happens, I know I'm covered, and I know that my family will be okay. So it
Mhm.
helps us to truly then be able to live our lives fully.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing all of that wonderful and very helpful information, Maureen. Before I end, I like to ask my guests these two questions. The first one is, what is something that you've learned in life that you would like to share with the audience?
One of the things I've learned has come from me being an oncology nurse is that life is short. We just don't know what's around the corner tomorrow. So to live life to the fullest each day and grasp the opportunities that are within our means, um, and to really embrace living the life that we want to. We get to choose. And so that if something does happen, we don't have that regret I was talking about. If only I had done this, because we did everything within our power. So that's one, to live life each day to its fullest, and to say the things that need to be said.
Mhm. Both are so important, just to your own quality of life and happiness. It's so important to do the things you want to do and say those and very important things that need to be said. So
Yes.
thank you for sharing that. And the second question is, what is next for you?
What is next? I'm really excited about, I just told you that I had taken my online program and made it into a self-paced program. So I'm super excited about that because not everyone feels comfortable sharing in a group, and it's something that they can do at their own pace. There's video recordings and documents to support it and things to get the work done. So I'm excited. I'm on a mission. What's next for me is just to keep this conversation going about getting the work done, getting this important documentation done so that when life happens, we're prepared.
Wonderful. And Maureen, if people are interested in connecting with you and learning more about Radiant Morning and how you can support them, where can they find you?
Well, I have a Facebook group, Facebook page, but also just they can email me at Maureen. My name's Maureen at Radiant Morning. Morning is in grief, like with it, not morning is the dawn of the
Morning.
day. Radiantmorning.com, Maureen at radiantmorning.com. And I'd love to have a chat and just
Wonderful.
see how I could help people.
Thank you. And I know that the work that you do is so important and it is helping save a lot of people stress, drama, and trauma. So thank you for all that you do. And before we end today, I just want to say how much I appreciate you for coming on and educating us about this very tough topic. And just keep doing what you're doing, Maureen. We need this.
Oh, thank you so much, Talia. I think what you do with people with cancer is so powerful because let's
Thank
face it, it's a diagnosis none of us want to get, but we do. We do get those diagnoses, and to be able to have someone to shepherd us through is so powerful. So
thank
thank
you. Thank you. And I appreciate your time, Maureen. Before we leave, I like to give a shout out to the listeners. Thank you so much for joining us today. That is it for this Wednesday. And until next time, let's keep navigating cancer together. Take care. Thanks for listening to this episode of Navigating Cancer Together. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to subscribe. And if you appreciate the show, drop a positive rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. For notes from the show, visit ontheotherside.life and check out the podcast section. After you check out the show notes, head over to my gift shop and show yourself or someone special in your life some love with gifts of encouragement, hope, and positive affirmations. I would love it if you joined us for the next episode. Talk to you soon.